Jaden Carter from the subsidized housing complex claiming his mother runs a Fortune 500 company. That's the most absurd fabrication I've encountered in 19 years of teaching. Ms. Ellen Rodriguez doesn't lower her voice. She proclaims it to every fifth grader assembled in room 312 at Lincoln Academy. Then she grabs Jaden's neatly composed essay from his desk and tears it down the middle. The ripping echoes through the shocked silence. She tears it again and again. The fragments drift downward like autumn leaves onto Jaden's scuffed sneakers. You don't manufacture stories about being exceptional, Jaden. CEOs reside in penthouses. Their children attend elite boarding schools. They arrive in chauffeurs and personal assistants. Her voice crystallizes into ice. They certainly don't appear looking like this. 9-year-old Jaden stands motionless. His fingers tremble. Every student in the classroom fixes their gaze upon him. She balls up the shredded pieces and tosses them toward the wastebasket. Disgraceful. Have you ever witnessed an educator annihilate a child for being brown-skinned and speaking his reality? 3 hours before this moment, Jaden Carter awakened to his mother's voice floating up from downstairs. Breakfast ready in 10 minutes, sweetheart. The Carter family occupied a compact 2-bedroom unit in the Riverside Terrace apartments in Newark, New Jersey, close enough to the financial district that Jaden could see the office towers glittering in the distance every morning. Their furniture came from thrift stores and clearance sales. The walls displayed family photographs, but nothing suggesting corporate wealth. No awards mounted, no newspaper clippings framed, no expensive art pieces. Calculated discretion. Victoria Carter didn't broadcast what she accomplished. In the kitchen, Jaden discovered his mom seated at their small table wearing jeans and a Princeton sweatshirt. To any observer, she resembled a regular mother, perhaps a librarian, perhaps an administrative assistant. His grandmother, Mrs. Alina Carter, poured orange juice while recovering from her recent surgery. She'd moved in 6 months ago when her health started failing. On the refrigerator, a child's marker drawing depicted a stick-figure woman in a business suit standing before a tall building. Beside it, a calendar with today's date highlighted in yellow. Career Presentation Day, Wednesday. Jaden couldn't contain his excitement. He'd been anticipating this day for months. Mom, can I mention the time you were on the cover of Forbes? Victoria glanced at her mother. Alina gave her that expression, the one suggesting their grandson deserved better than invisibility. Jaden, remember our discussion. Your mother's position attracts unwanted attention sometimes. We maintain privacy for safety reasons, but everyone else gets to celebrate their parents' achievements. I understand, baby. Victoria's voice carried warmth but firmness. Our circumstances are unique. We preserve a low profile. You comprehend why, don't you? Jaden nodded, though comprehension eluded him. Not truly. Why did other children get to express pride while he had to remain silent? Alina squeezed her daughter's hand across the table. He deserves to celebrate you, Victoria. This hiding diminishes what you've built. I know, Mama. The CEO looked at her son. Just keep it straightforward tomorrow, okay? You don't need to justify anything to anyone. Jaden finished his cereal and headed upstairs to prepare for school. He didn't realize that in less than 8 hours, straightforward would become impossible. Lincoln Academy occupied a brick building in Newark's education district. The school served diverse population, children from struggling families living paycheck to paycheck, kids whose parents worked multiple jobs just to afford rent, a handful of students whose families had achieved success and moved to better neighborhoods but kept their children enrolled. It was supposed to represent a place where every child received equal respect, but Ms. Ellen Rodriguez had taught there for 19 years. And in those 19 years, she'd cultivated a precise understanding of who spoke truth and who embellished. Her classroom walls showcased the American flag, photographs of her receiving district teaching awards, and motivational posters about hard work and honesty. She wore professional attire every single day, blazers and pressed slacks, her hair always perfectly styled. And she'd never built a business, never negotiated with investors, never spent a day outside of comfortable middle-class existence, but she knew what Fortune 500 executives looked like, and Jaden Carter didn't fit the image. During morning roll call, Principal Morrison's voice crackled through the speaker system. Good morning, Lincoln Academy. Reminder that Career Presentation Day continues today. We're privileged to welcome some remarkable guests. Please extend your finest hospitality. In Ms. Rodriguez's classroom, the atmosphere shifted immediately. Brandon Walsh, a white student whose father practiced corporate law, raised his hand. Ms. Rodriguez, my dad just won a case worth $12 million for his firm. How wonderful, Brandon. Her face illuminated. Legal expertise contributes so significantly to our society. Maria Gonzalez, whose mother cleaned office buildings downtown, raised her hand next. My mom works in those same buildings. She makes sure everything stays clean for the lawyers and business people. That's pleasant, Maria. Ms. Rodriguez's smile seemed mechanical. Now, let's retrieve our social studies textbooks from your desks. Jaden observed the pattern. He'd noticed this distinction before. Certain students received enthusiasm, others received dismissal. It typically correlated with parental occupations and family income. At 10:30, Ms. Rodriguez distributed the assignment. Class, I want you to compose 4 paragraphs about your parents' professions. What do they accomplish? Why does it contribute value? How does it benefit our community? She moved between the desks. Complete this before our guests arrive. Legible handwriting, please. Students immediately bent over their papers. Jaden retrieved his pencil and began writing in careful cursive letters. My mother is Victoria Carter, the CEO of Apex Solutions, a Fortune 500 technology company. She leads over 8,000 employees across 17 countries. Her company creates software that hospitals use to save patients' lives and that schools use to help students learn. There are only 41 black women who have ever been Fortune 500 CEOs in American history. My mom started her career as a software engineer and worked her way up through determination and innovation. She often says leadership means lifting others up, not standing on them to get higher. My mom works 80-hour weeks sometimes. I don't see her as much as I want, but she does it because she's creating opportunities for people who look like us. That's what makes her work matter. Marcus Williams, Jaden's closest friend, leaned over and whispered, "Yo, is your mom really a CEO?" Jaden nodded, keeping his voice subdued. "Yes, she just doesn't talk about it publicly. That's incredible. My mom just works at the post office." Jaden whispered back, "My mom says every job matters, Marcus. Your mom keeps our whole community connected. That's important work too." Marcus grinned. Ms. Rodriguez materialized beside Jaden's desk. Her shadow fell across his paper. She leaned down and read over his shoulder, her lips compressed into a tight line. Jaden felt his stomach plummet. Something in her expression communicated disbelief in every word, but she said nothing. Not yet. She simply returned to her desk and made a notation in her grade book. As the morning progressed, Jaden's phone vibrated in his backpack. The school permitted students to carry emergency contact devices. His was an older model smartphone his mother could reach him on. He checked it during the restroom break, a text from his mother. "Board meeting ran late, leaving office now. Should arrive by noon. Prepared my presentation. Can't wait to see your face when I walk in." Jaden's heart soared. His mother had been preparing for a major investor presentation all week. Some kind of acquisition deal Jaden wasn't supposed to understand the details about, but she was coming. She'd make it to career presentation day. Jaden wanted to announce it to everyone. Instead, he slipped the phone back into his bag and returned to class. He didn't notice Ms. Rodriguez observing him from her desk, didn't perceive the skeptical expression in her eyes. She'd already formulated her conclusion about Jaden Carter. That boy was a fabricator. And today, in front of everyone, she was going to teach him a lesson about truthfulness. What she didn't know was that in less than 90 minutes, a Fortune 500 CEO would walk through her classroom door, and everything she assumed she understood about Jaden Carter would shatter like crystal. The following period arrived with unusual anticipation at Lincoln Academy. Parents began entering Ms. Rodriguez's classroom at 11 o'clock. A dentist in medical scrubs, an electrician carrying tools, a social worker, a restaurant manager in chef's whites, a postal worker still wearing her uniform from the morning shift. Ms. Rodriguez greeted each one with varying degrees of enthusiasm. The dentist received a warm handshake and genuine smile. The restaurant manager received a polite acknowledgement. The postal worker received a quick "thank you for your service" before Rodriguez turned to organize chairs. Jaden sat at his desk, checking his phone every few seconds. His mom had texted at 9:15 that morning. "Left the office, traffic heavy on Route 1. We'll be there by 11:45. So proud of you, baby. One more hour." Jaden just had to endure one more hour. Class. Ms. Rodriguez clapped her hands. "Before our guests present, let's share the paragraphs you composed. I want our visitors to hear how thoughtfully you describe their professions. One by one, students stood and read. Brandon Walsh discussed his father's law firm and the important cases they won. Ms. Rodriguez beamed with approval. Maria Gonzalez talked about her mother's cleaning work and how she took pride in maintaining beautiful spaces. Ms. Rodriguez offered a tight smile and advanced quickly. Then she called on Jaden. "Jaden Carter, you're next." Jaden stood. His paper trembled slightly in his hands. He cleared his throat and began reading. "My mother is Victoria Carter, the CEO of Apex Solutions, a Fortune 500 technology company. She leads over 8,000 employees across 17 countries. Her company creates software that hospitals use to save patients' lives." Ms. Rodriguez's expression transformed immediately. "There are only 41 black women who have ever been Fortune 500 CEOs. Stop." The words sliced through the classroom like a blade. Every student froze. Parents looked up from their phones. Ms. Rodriguez stood slowly from her desk. "Jaden, approach my desk, please." Jaden walked to the front of the room on unsteady legs, his heart pounding against his ribs. "Class," Ms. Rodriguez said, her voice adopting a lecturing tone. "This represents a perfect example of what we call fantasy storytelling. Jaden, I need you to be honest with everyone right now. What does your mother actually do?" She's a CEO, ma'am." Her eyes narrowed. "Jaden, I have been teaching for 19 years. I have met executives. I have taught children of executives." She crossed her arms. "CEOs do not reside in subsidized housing. Their children do not attend public schools in discount clothing. Their families are prominent in the community. There are society pages, charity events, recognition." Jaden felt his face growing hot. "But ma'am, my mom maintains privacy because of what? Corporate espionage." Her tone dripped with mockery. Several students laughed nervously. Brandon Walsh raised his hand. "Ms. Rodriguez, maybe his mom really is." "Brandon, I appreciate your generosity, but this is an educational moment." She turned back to Jaden. "I verified with administration yesterday. There is no Victoria Carter listed as a Fortune 500 CEO in our parent database. Your mother's occupation is listed as technology worker. That's vastly different from a Fortune 500 CEO, isn't it?" Jaden's eyes filled with tears. "She puts that on forms for privacy reasons. She told me enough." The classroom flinched at her raised voice. "You will sit down immediately. You will rewrite this assignment with factual information, and you will apologize to this class and to our guests for wasting everyone's time with fantasy stories. Do you understand me?" Tears spilled down Jaden's cheeks, but he didn't move. "Jaden," I said, "sit down." "My mom didn't raise me to lie, ma'am." The room went completely silent. Ms. Rodriguez's face flushed crimson. Several parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "What did you just say to me?" "My mom is a CEO. She's driving here from her office. She'll be here at 11:45. You'll see." Ms. Rodriguez's jaw clenched. "To the principal's office immediately." Marcus Williams stood up. "But Ms. Rodriguez, Jaden's not lying. I've seen his mom." "Marcus, sit down before you join him." Marcus sank back into his chair, shooting Jaden an apologetic look. Jaden grabbed his backpack. As he walked toward the door, Ms. Rodriguez delivered her final blow loud enough for everyone to hear. "Class, let this be a lesson. Honesty and humility are virtues we value. Inflating yourself to seem more important than you are, especially when you come from certain backgrounds, is the opposite of character." Jaden stopped at the door. His hands gripped the straps of his backpack so tightly they left impressions. Every eye in the room watched him leave in humiliation. He had 75 minutes until his mother arrived. 75 minutes to survive being labeled a liar in front of everyone. He had no idea that Ms. Rodriguez was about to experience the worst day of her teaching career. The corridor felt endless. Jaden walked slowly toward the principal's office, his sneakers squeaking against the polished tile. Behind him, he could hear Ms. Rodriguez's voice resuming the career day introductions as if nothing had occurred, as if she hadn't just demolished him in front of the entire class. He pulled out his phone. Still no new messages from his mom. Probably navigating that terrible traffic on Route 1. Jaden thought about texting her, about telling her what just happened. But what would he say? That his teacher called him a liar, that nobody believed him. His mom had enough pressure with the board meeting. Jaden didn't want to appear weak. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and continued walking. Through the main office window, Jaden spotted Principal Morrison on the telephone. She was nodding seriously, her expression concentrated. She glanced at a document on her desk, then looked up and made eye contact with Jaden through the glass. Her eyes widened slightly. like she recognized him, but she was mid-conversation, so she just gave him a small nod and returned to her call. Jaden wondered if Ms. Rodriguez had already called ahead to complain about him. Vice Principal Chen handled the meeting. Principal Morrison was still occupied with her telephone call, her office door closed. Mr. Chen was an Asian-American man in his 40s who'd been at Lincoln Academy for 12 years. He wore a button-down shirt and tie, glasses perched on his nose. He had the kind of face that always looked slightly concerned. "Sit down, Jaden." Jaden sat in the chair across from Chen's desk. It was too large for him. His feet barely touched the floor. "So," Mr. Chen began, opening a folder. "Ms. Rodriguez tells me you disrupted class and refused to correct false information in your assignment." "Sir, it's not false. My mom really is Jaden." Chen held up a hand. "I pulled your file. Your mother is listed as Victoria Carter, Occupation Technology Sector. That's what's in our system. That's what she writes on forms, sir, for privacy reason. She's not supposed to, privacy reason." Chen's expression suggested patience wearing thin. "Jaden, I understand wanting your mother to seem important. Many kids do that, but fabricating elaborate stories about Fortune 500 companies and executive positions, I'm not fabricating." Jaden's voice came out louder than he intended. Chen's face hardened. "Lower your voice. You're already in trouble, son. Don't make it worse." Jaden's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out quickly, a text from his mom. "Stuck in accident traffic on Turnpike. Calling the school to let them know I'll be there by 12:15. Stay strong, baby." Jaden's heart leaped. He showed the phone to Chen. "See, she's coming. She's calling the school right now." Chen barely glanced at the screen. "Jaden, I can't verify anything from a text message. You could have anyone's number saved as mom in your contacts, but here's what's going to happen." Chen leaned forward. "You're going to return to class. You're going to apologize to Ms. Rodriguez for being disrespectful. You're going to rewrite that assignment with accurate information, and then we're going to move forward. Understood?" Jaden felt his hands beginning to shake. "You don't believe me. I believe you want attention, Jaden. I understand that impulse. Kids from single-parent homes or families struggling financially sometimes create stories to feel special. It's a cry for help, really. My grandma lives with us. My mom takes care of her. My mom is, that's enough." Chen stood. "Return to class right now, or I will call your mother in for a formal disciplinary conference, and trust me, you don't want that on your record." Jaden stood slowly, his vision blurred with tears he refused to let fall. "My mother built her company from nothing, sir. She's one of 41 black women to ever run a Fortune 500 company. She's earned the right to be believed." Chen's expression softened slightly, but only slightly. "Go back to class, Jaden." When Jaden returned to room 312, everything had transformed. Parents now filled the back and sides of the classroom, sitting in a semicircle of borrowed chairs. Career day was in full swing. Ms. Rodriguez stood at the front, introducing Dr. Patel. "So grateful to have these distinguished guests with us today. Dr. Patel operates a thriving dental practice. Let's give him our full attention." Applause rippled through the room. Jaden slid into his seat as quietly as possible. Marcus leaned over and whispered, "You okay?" Before Jaden could answer, Ms. Rodriguez's voice cut across the room. "Jaden, do you have something to share with the class?" Every head turned. Students, parents, everyone stared. "Ma'am, your apology." Jaden felt his stomach drop. The room went completely silent. This wasn't just his classmates anymore. There were adults here, professional people, watching him be humiliated. A 9-year-old brown-skinned boy being forced to apologize for telling the truth. I don't have anything to apologize for, ma'am." The room gasped. Several parents exchanged glances. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked at Jaden like he was being disrespectful. Ms. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. "Excuse me, in front of our honored guests, you're going to continue this defiance." Brandon's mother, Mrs. Walsh, a paralegal in a navy suit, spoke up gently. "Perhaps we should let the child explain. I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Walsh, but classroom management is my responsibility." Ms. Rodriguez's smile was tight and professional, but her eyes were hard. She turned back to Jaden. "You have two choices, young man. You can apologize right now and rewrite your assignment with honest information, or you can spend the rest of career day sitting in the office while your classmates enjoy our guests. Which will it be?" Jaden's voice cracked when he spoke. "When my mom gets here, your mother is not coming, Jaden." The words echoed through the classroom like a slap. Parents shifted in their seats. Some students looked down at their desks. Ms. Rodriguez continued, her voice taking on a tone of forced patience. Sweetheart, I understand this is difficult, but the truth is your mother probably works a regular technology job. Maybe in IT support, maybe in data entry. Those are perfectly respectable positions. She walked closer to his desk. But you've created this fantasy about Fortune 500 companies and CEO positions because you're embarrassed. I get it. You see Brandon's dad arguing cases in court, and you want your family to seem just as important. Her voice dropped, quieter now, but somehow more cutting. But Jaden, there is no shame in being ordinary. The shame is in lying about it, especially when you come from a community that already struggles with stereotypes about honesty and integrity. Mrs. Walsh stood up. Ms. Rodriguez, I really don't think. Please, Mrs. Walsh, sit down. The paralegal sat slowly, her expression troubled. Marcus muttered under his breath, this is messed up. What was that, Marcus? Nothing, ma'am. Marcus Williams, I heard you. Office now. But I didn't now. Marcus grabbed his backpack and walked out, giving Jaden one last look of solidarity before disappearing into the hallway. Jaden was alone now, completely isolated in a room full of people. Ms. Rodriguez stood over him, arms crossed, waiting for his apology. The other parents looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. The clock on the wall showed 11:32. His mother would arrive in approximately 43 minutes. But right now, in this moment, Jaden Carter had never felt smaller in his entire life. He looked down at his desk at the empty space where his assignment had been before she tore it up. His hands gripped the edge of the desk. And then he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He stood up. Ma'am, he said quietly, my name is Jaden Carter. My mother is Victoria Carter. She's the CEO of Apex Solutions, a Fortune 500 technology company. She's built that company over 17 years, and when she gets here, you're going to owe me an apology. Ms. Rodriguez's face flushed deep crimson. Sit down. No, ma'am. The room held its breath. Jaden Carter, if you do not sit down right now, the classroom door opened. Principal Morrison stepped inside, slightly out of breath, her face flushed. Ms. Rodriguez, hallway immediately. The tone of her voice made it clear this wasn't a request. Ms. Rodriguez blinked in surprise. Principal Morrison, I'm in the middle of now, Ellen. Every parent in the room noticed the use of her first name. That never happened. Ms. Rodriguez followed Principal Morrison into the hallway, the door closing behind them with a soft click. Through the small window, students could see them talking. Principal Morrison's face was serious. Ms. Rodriguez's expression shifted from confusion to shock to something that looked like fear. Jaden sat back down, his heart pounding. Whatever was happening out there, it had to do with him. The clock ticked forward. 11:35. In the hallway, Principal Morrison kept her voice low but firm. Ellen, we have a situation. Ms. Rodriguez crossed her arms defensively. If this is about Jaden Carter, I was simply maintaining academic standards. The boy was clearly, I just spent 30 minutes on the phone with Apex Solutions Corporate Communications Office. The words hung in the air. Ms. Rodriguez blinked. Corporate Communications. Yes. They called because we have a very distinguished visitor arriving. Morrison pulled out her phone, showing Rodriguez an email. They needed to confirm our security protocols, parking arrangements, and whether we could accommodate her executive assistant and security detail. Ms. Rodriguez's face went pale. Security detail for career day. For Jaden Carter's mother. The hallway seemed to tilt. Jaden Carter. Yes, Ellen. The 9-year-old boy you publicly humiliated this morning for supposedly lying about his mother being a Fortune 500 CEO. Oh my God. The boy you sent to my office. The boy whose assignment you tore up. The boy you accused of fabricating stories because of where he lives and how he looks. Ms. Rodriguez's hand went to her mouth. I thought he was exaggerating. He lives in subsidized housing. The mother isn't on any social registers. There was no indication because successful people, especially successful black women, often maintain privacy for safety reasons. Principal Morrison had never raised her voice at a teacher in 13 years of administration, but she was raising it now. I have spent the last half hour on the phone with a very polite but very firm executive assistant explaining why a 5th grader was called a liar for telling the truth about his mother's accomplishments. Do you have any idea what you've done? Through the hallway windows, both women could see movement outside. 2 sleek black cars pulled into the school's front circle. A professional woman in a business suit stepped out first, carrying a tablet, clearly an executive assistant. She moved with practiced precision, speaking into a phone. Then from the second vehicle, a woman stepped out. She was tall, dignified, wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo. Diamond earrings caught the midday sunlight. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions before breakfast. Victoria Carter had arrived. Ms. Rodriguez felt her knees go weak. Oh God, she's real. Yes, Ellen, she's real. And right now she's walking into my school to check on the son you humiliated in front of his peers. Inside the classroom, students and parents noticed the commotion outside. Is that someone famous? One kid whispered, "Look at how she carries herself." Mrs. Walsh, the paralegal, stood and moved to the window, her eyes widened. That's Victoria Carter. I've seen her in business publication. Apex Solutions. The room erupted in whispers. Jaden sat frozen at his desk. Through the window, he could see his mother walking toward the school entrance with that calm, purposeful stride he'd seen 1,000 times. His mom was here, in full CEO mode. Everyone was about to see the truth. Victoria Carter walked through Lincoln Academy's main entrance like she was approaching a board meeting, calm, measured, taking in every detail. The executive assistant remained outside per her instruction. This wasn't a corporate event. This was a mother checking on her son. Principal Morrison met her in the main hallway. "Ms. Carter, I'm Principal Morrison. I want to apologize profusely for." She shook her hand firmly but briefly. "Principal Morrison, I appreciate you accommodating the disruption to your school day. I apologize for the short notice." Her voice was professional, controlled, but there was steel underneath. "I understand there was some miscommunication regarding my son's assignment." Behind Morrison, Ms. Rodriguez stood frozen, her face the color of chalk. Victoria Carter's eyes moved to her, not angry, just assessing. "You're Jaden's teacher." "Yes, ma'am." "Ms. Rodriguez, Ms. Carter, I want to apologize. There was a terrible misunderstanding about misunderstanding." Her tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "My son was called a liar in front of his peers for telling the truth about his mother's career. Where exactly was the misunderstanding?" "Ma'am, I didn't know. I had no way to verify." "You didn't verify." She let the words hang there. "You assume." Ms. Rodriguez had no response. Victoria Carter continued, her voice quiet but cutting. "Ma'am, I've spent 17 years building a company from the ground up. One thing I've learned in that time, assumptions about people based on how they look, where they live, or what you think they should be, those assumptions are usually wrong and they're always dangerous." She adjusted her suit jacket slightly. "I've negotiated with venture capitalists. I've presented to boards of directors. I've made decisions that affected thousands of employees and their families. But right now, the most important thing I need to do is check on my 9-year-old son who was humiliated for telling his truth." Her eyes never left hers. "Where is Jaden?" The classroom door opened. Principal Morrison entered first, her professional smile not quite hiding her stress. "Class, we have a very special guest joining us for Career Day." Ms. Rodriguez followed, looking like she might be sick. Then Victoria Carter stepped through the doorway. The effect was immediate. The room went silent. Not classroom silent, cathedral silent. Every parent stood without thinking. Mrs. Walsh, who regularly worked with corporate attorneys, actually straightened her posture like she was in court. Dr. Patel, the dentist, placed his hand over his heart. The working-class families in the room recognized success when they saw it. This was Victoria Carter. You don't see a Fortune 500 CEO walk into an elementary school every day. Jaden saw his mother, and everything he'd been holding inside broke open. "Mom." His voice was small, broken, relieved. Victoria Carter's professional demeanor cracked for just a moment. Her eyes found her son sitting at that desk, tear-stained and exhausted. She crossed the room in 4 long strides, not caring about protocol or appearances. She knelt down to Jaden's level, right there in front of everyone, and pulled her son into her arms. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. I'm sorry traffic was so terrible." Jaden buried his face in his mother's shoulder and cried. Not because he was sad anymore, because he'd been holding everything in for so long. Because his mom was finally here. Because the truth was finally visible. The embrace lasted maybe 15 seconds, but in those 15 seconds, every person in that room understood what they'd witnessed this morning. A child telling the truth and being destroyed for it. Victoria Carter stood, keeping Jaden's hand in hers. She turned to face the class. "Good morning. I'm Victoria Carter, CEO of Apex Solutions. I apologize for the disruption to your career day, but I promised my son I'd be here, and I don't break promises to my son." Her voice was calm, professional, but every word carried weight. She glanced at Ms. Rodriguez, who stood near her desk, looking like she wanted to disappear. "Ma'am, I understand there was some question about Jaden's assignment." The room held its breath. Ms. Rodriguez opened her mouth, but no words came out. Principal Morrison stepped in. Ms. Carter, please. If you'd like to share with the students about your career, we'd be honored. She nodded once. Thank you. She turned back to the class, Jaden still holding her hand. My son wrote that I'm the CEO of a Fortune 500 technology company that serves hospitals and schools. Every single word of that is true. I started my career as a software engineer making $40,000 a year. I worked nights and weekends while pregnant with Jaden. I built my first product in our one-bedroom apartment while he slept in a bassinet next to my desk. The students stared with wide eyes. Jaden also wrote that leadership means lifting others up, not standing on them to get higher. He learned that by watching his grandmother, who worked as a nurse for 40 years and never complained once. He learned it by watching me fail, because I've failed many times, lose investors, lose contracts, almost lose everything. He learned it by understanding that success isn't about erasing where you came from. It's about bringing others along with you. She paused, looking at each student. My son didn't exaggerate in his assignment. If anything, he was modest. The truth of what it takes to build something from nothing, especially as a black woman in technology, is harder than anything he wrote on that paper. Her eyes moved to Ms. Rodriguez. When a child tells you their truth, especially when that truth is difficult or doesn't match your expectations, the first instinct should be to listen, not to assume they're lying because their truth makes you uncomfortable. The room was absolutely silent. Ms. Rodriguez's voice came out as a whisper. Ms. Carter, I owe Jaden an apology, a real one. She turned to face Jaden, tears streaming down her face. Jaden, I was wrong, completely, utterly wrong. I made assumptions about you and your family based on things that had nothing to do with who you are. I judged you based on your address, your clothing, my own narrow view of what success looks like. I didn't listen to you. I didn't believe you, and I hurt you deeply. Her voice broke. You deserved so much better from me. You deserve to be believed. I am so sorry. Jaden looked at his mother, who gave him a small nod. Your choice, baby. Jaden took a breath. Ms. Rodriguez, my mom says everybody makes mistakes. She says the important thing is learning from them and doing better. The wisdom in those words, coming from a 9-year-old who'd been humiliated hours earlier, hit everyone in the room. Maybe you could, believe kids more, even when their stories sound too big to be true. Especially then. I will, Jaden. Ms. Rodriguez wiped her eyes. I promise I will. Marcus was brought back from the office. Victoria Carter shook his hand and thanked him for standing up for Jaden. Brandon Walsh approached Jaden afterward. I'm sorry I didn't say more earlier. What she did was really wrong. Other students gathered around Jaden, not with pity now, with respect. Mrs. Walsh approached Victoria Carter. Ma'am, I work in law offices every day. What you said about assumptions, I needed to hear that too. Maria's mother, who cleaned office buildings, shook Victoria's hand with tears in her eyes. Thank you for what you said about success. My daughter needs to hear that she can be anything. Principal Morrison made an announcement to the class. Effective immediately, Lincoln Academy will be implementing comprehensive bias awareness training for all staff members. What happened this morning should never happen again. Ms. Rodriguez nodded, her hand over her heart. I'll be the first to enroll. Victoria Carter then did something unexpected. From her briefcase, she pulled out a small package. Inside was a framed photograph of a young black woman in a college sweatshirt, sitting at a computer in a tiny apartment. This is me at 23, broke, scared, building my first software program. I keep copies of this photo in my office to remember where I started. She placed it in Ms. Rodriguez's hands. I'm not giving you this for what happened this morning, ma'am. I'm giving it to you for your apology. That took real courage. Use it to remember that you can never tell someone's potential by their circumstances. Ms. Rodriguez clutched the frame, nodding, unable to speak. For the next 30 minutes, Victoria Carter gave a presentation about entrepreneurship, technology, and perseverance. She answered questions from curious students. She shared age-appropriate stories about building her company. She made every child feel important. And at the end, Principal Morrison suggested a class photo. Students gathered around the CEO. Jaden stood front and center, his hand in his mother's hand, wearing the biggest smile of his life. That photo would circulate on social media within 72 hours. But right now, in this moment, it was just a son standing with his mom, finally believed, finally vindicated, finally seen. That evening, the Carter family sat together in their modest Riverside Terrace apartment, the same apartment Ms. Rodriguez had judged as proof that Jaden was lying. Victoria Carter had left the office early after calling to reschedule her investor meeting. The investors understood completely after she explained what happened. Now she sat on the couch with Jaden tucked under her arm, still in her business suit. Alina Carter sat in her favorite chair, recovering but present, her eyes bright with pride. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Victoria asked, smoothing Jaden's hair. Tired, Jaden leaned into his mother. "But good, I think. What did you learn today?" his grandmother asked. Jaden thought about it carefully. His family had always taught him to find lessons in difficult experiences. "I learned that telling the truth is really hard sometimes, especially when people don't want to believe you, but you should still do it anyway." Victoria nodded. "What else?" "That people's ideas about you can be totally wrong, but that doesn't mean you should change who you are to fit what they expect." Alina smiled. "That's very wise, Jaden." "But Mom," Jaden looked up at his mother. "Yes, baby. Why didn't you just tell the school about your job before? Then this wouldn't have happened." It was a fair question, one that Victoria had been asking herself all afternoon. She leaned back, considering her words carefully. "Jaden, your worth has nothing to do with my job title. You're valuable because of who you are. You're kind, you're honest, you're brave. I never want you to think you need my accomplishments to matter." She paused. "But I also realize now that keeping such a low profile put you in an impossible position. You shouldn't have had to defend your truth alone. We'll find a better balance." "So what happens now?" "Now we make sure this never happens to another kid at Lincoln Academy or anywhere else." 4 months passed. Lincoln Academy looked different now, not physically, but the culture had shifted profoundly. Every staff member completed comprehensive implicit bias training. It wasn't optional. Principal Morrison made it a requirement for continued employment. The training covered racial bias, class bias, gender bias, and the danger of assumptions, real scenarios, uncomfortable conversations, necessary growth. Ms. Ellen Rodriguez attended every session. She didn't just participate, she helped facilitate them. In a faculty meeting 3 months after the incident, she stood in front of her colleagues and shared her experience. 4 months ago, I destroyed a child because I couldn't see past my own assumption. I looked at Jaden Carter and decided his truth was impossible because it didn't match the picture I had in my head of what a CEO's family should look like. Her voice was steady now, stronger. I've spent the last few months examining my biases, the ones I didn't even know I had. I've learned that my instincts about students were often just prejudices disguised as experience. She held up the framed photograph Victoria Carter had given her. I keep this on my desk, not as a trophy, as a reminder. You cannot judge potential by circumstances. You cannot assume someone's truth based on your limited perspective. The training led to real policy changes, new protocols, verify before questioning. If a student makes a claim about their family that seems unusual, the first step is to check with parents respectfully, not to interrogate the child. The Student Council, inspired by Jaden's experience, created the Truth Matters initiative, a peer support system where students could talk about times they felt unheard or disbelieved. Jaden became one of the founding members. Ms. Rodriguez's classroom changed too. On the first day back after the incident, she gathered her students and created a new classroom charter. The kids helped write it. It hung on the wall now in large letters. "In this classroom, we believe first and question with respect. We never assume someone is lying because their truth seems impossible. Everyone's story matters. Every voice deserves to be heard." Every student signed it, even Jaden, especially Jaden. Ms. Rodriguez also started a monthly family heritage circle. Students could share about their families without judgment or comparison. The goal wasn't to compete, just to listen and learn and celebrate. During one session, Maria Gonzalez talked about how her mother took pride in her cleaning work, how she knew the history of every building she maintained, how executives sometimes stopped to chat with her and ask about their families. Ms. Rodriguez listened differently now. She heard the pride in Maria's voice instead of dismissing it as less prestigious than other careers. Marcus talked about how his mom had worked at the post office for 15 years, how she knew everyone in the neighborhood, how she'd helped elderly residents navigate their mail and packages during the pandemic. Brandon Walsh surprised everyone by saying his dad's law career seemed less meaningful after meeting Ms. Carter, that he'd started thinking about what real impact looked like. And Jaden, he talked about entrepreneurship, about sacrifice, about the children whose parents work exhausting hours to build something better. The class listened without interruption. That's what changed most. The listening. The viral photo spread faster than anyone expected. The image of Victoria Carter in her business suit, professional and poised, kneeling beside her 9-year-old son, while emotional students and parents looked on. The caption that went with it told the story: how a teacher had called a black student a liar for writing about his mother's success, how she'd torn up his assignment, how she'd humiliated him publicly, and how a Fortune 500 CEO had walked into that classroom to stand beside her son. News outlets picked it up. The story appeared on local news, then national broadcasts, then international media. Social media exploded with reaction. Some people focused on the racism, others on the classism, many on the courage it took for Jayden to stand his ground. But the most shared aspect was Ms. Rodriguez's apology and transformation. People were exhausted by stories where the antagonist faced consequences but never changed. This was different. This showed redemption was possible, that people could grow. 4 months later, Ms. Rodriguez received invitations to speak at education conferences about implicit bias. She accepted some, declined others, but always emphasized the same message. I'm not a hero of this story. I'm the lesson, but I'm proof that people can change if they're willing to do the uncomfortable work. Jayden today is different from the frightened 9-year-old who stood at the front of that classroom. He's more confident, still humble, still kind, but no longer afraid to share his truth. He started a peer support program at Lincoln Academy where older students mentor younger ones navigating difficult situations. The first principle of the program, believe first, question with kindness. His friendship with Marcus grew stronger. Brandon Walsh became a regular at their lunch table. Even Maria Gonzalez joined their group. They called themselves the Truth Circle, kids who committed to listening to each other's stories without judgment or assumption. Victoria Carter attended school events when her schedule allowed, not in business attire, just as Jayden's mom. She wanted her son to know she was proud of him for who he was, not what his mother achieved. Alina Carter continued to recover, and she made sure to attend every one of Jayden's presentations about entrepreneurship and perseverance, because that's what this was really about. Not Fortune 500 companies or CEO titles or corporate success, but a family that loved each other, and a son who learned that truth, even when it's hard, is always worth defending. The Carter family returned to their quiet life in Riverside Terrace, but Lincoln Academy and everyone who heard Jayden's story was forever changed. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand in your truth, even when the whole world tells you you're wrong, especially then. Jayden Carter's story is one child's experience in one classroom in Newark, New Jersey, but it represents something much larger happening in schools across America every single day. Right now, somewhere a child is being told their truth doesn't matter because it doesn't match someone's expectation. A brown-skinned student is being questioned more harshly than their lighter-skinned classmates. A child from a struggling family is being dismissed because adults assume they're exaggerating. An immigrant kid is being misunderstood because people don't see the sacrifice behind their achievements. And most of the time, there's no Fortune 500 CEO walking through the door to make it right. So the question becomes, what do we do about it? The statistics are devastating. According to the U.S. Department of Education, Black and Latino students are suspended or expelled at significantly higher rates than white students for identical infractions. Subjective offenses, things like defiance or disruption, account for most of these disparities. Translation: when a teacher has to use judgment about whether a student is being disrespectful, students of color are punished more severely. The same study found that 78% of teachers have never received any training in recognizing their own implicit biases. They're making decisions about children's futures based on assumptions they don't even know they have. Another study from the American Psychological Association found that Black children as young as 9 are seen as less innocent and more adult-like than their white peers. They're given less benefit of the doubt, less grace, less childhood. Jayden Carter experienced all of this in one morning, and his story shows us the real cost. Children who feel unheard in school are significantly more likely to disengage academically. They stop raising their hands, stop sharing their stories, stop believing their truth matters. That's the invisible damage of bias. Not just the moment of humiliation, but the slow erosion of a child's belief in themselves, in their worth, in their future. But Jayden's story also shows us something else. That change is possible, that people can grow, that systems can improve when we demand better. Ms. Rodriguez could have denied what she did. She could have made excuses. She could have blamed Jayden for being too sensitive or too defiant. Instead, she did the harder thing. She looked at her own biases honestly. She apologized sincerely. She changed her classroom and her entire approach to teaching. That doesn't erase what she did, but it shows a path forward for others. Lincoln Academy could have swept the incident under the rug, protected their reputation, dismissed it as an isolated misunderstanding. Instead, they implemented mandatory bias training. They changed their policies. They created systems to prevent it from happening again. That's how institutions improve, by acknowledging harm and taking concrete action to prevent future harm. And Jaden, he could have let that experience make him small and quiet and afraid. Instead, he started a peer support program. He shared his story. He helped other kids find their voice. That's resilience. Not because trauma made him stronger, that's a dangerous myth, but because he chose to use his experience to help others, to turn pain into purpose. So what can you do? First, ask yourself some difficult questions. When someone tells you their truth, especially someone from a marginalized community, do you believe them first, or do you immediately look for reasons to doubt? When a child shares something that seems unusual or impressive about their family, is your first instinct to celebrate them or to question whether they're exaggerating? When you see someone being treated unfairly, do you speak up even when it's uncomfortable, or do you stay silent to avoid making things awkward? These aren't comfortable questions, but they're necessary ones. They're the questions that lead to growth, to change, to a more just world for all children. Second, take action in your own sphere of influence. If you're a parent, talk to your child's school about implicit bias training. Ask what policies they have to protect students from discrimination based on race, class, or any other factor. Demand accountability. If you're a teacher, examine your own classroom with brutal honesty. Are you giving every student the same benefit of the doubt? Or are your unconscious assumptions affecting how you treat them? Are you creating space for all truths, or just the ones that fit your expectation? If you're just someone who heard this story and felt something shift inside you, share it. Conversations change culture. The more we talk about these issues openly and honestly, the harder they are to ignore, the more we normalize challenging our own biases. And finally, teach the children in your life that their truth matters, that they don't have to shrink themselves to make adults comfortable, that standing in your truth, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, is always worth it, that their voice has value regardless of where they come from or what they look like. Victoria Carter didn't walk into Lincoln Academy that morning to humiliate a teacher or to show off her success. She walked in to stand beside her son, to show Jaden and every child watching that truth matters, that you matter, that your story deserves to be heard and believed. The question now is, what will you do with that message? Will you scroll past this story and forget it by tomorrow? Let it fade into the endless stream of content you consume daily? Or will you let it change how you listen, how you believe, how you treat the people around you, especially the vulnerable ones, especially the children? Because here's the truth that Jaden Carter learned at 9 years old. One person standing in their truth can change an entire system, can shift perspectives, can open eyes, but only if the rest of us are willing to listen, to examine ourselves honestly, to do the uncomfortable work of change. If this story moved you, do 3 things that matter. 1. Share it. Someone in your life needs to hear this message today. Someone is struggling to be believed, struggling to stand in their truth, and your sharing this story might give them the courage to keep going. 2. Reflect deeply. Have you ever been disbelieved when telling your truth or witnessed someone else's truth being dismissed? What did that moment teach you? How did it change you? Your story matters too. 3. Take 1 concrete action this week. Have 1 conversation about bias. Question 1 assumption you've been carrying. Believe 1 person whose truth seems unlikely. Small actions create ripples that become waves. Remember, your truth matters. You matter. Don't let anyone, not a teacher, not a boss, not society, not anyone, make you forget that fundamental reality. And if you have the privilege of being believed easily, use that privilege to amplify the voices of those who aren't, to stand beside the Jadens of the world, to demand better from the systems and institutions that shape our children's futures. Because every child deserves what Jaden finally got that day: to be heard, to be believed, to be seen for exactly who they are, not who we assume they should be.